Twitter closing around session highs today. It comes 7 days after Elon Musk made an unsolicited $43 billion bid for the social media giant. And now a former Twitter senior vice president is speaking out, saying the company must drown out external and internal distractions. Alex Redder brought Twitter CEO Parag Agrawal into the company during his tenure. Alex is now general partner at Moxie Ventures. Alex, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I'm wondering what you think of Elon Musk, because shareholders in general, I mean, if you take a look at how the stock has reacted, think that Elon Musk has some sort of silver bullet for Twitter.
I think that's a problem with Twitter. They've always had this narrative that there's a silver bullet, whether it's the return of a founder or a new CEO or a new head of product. There is no silver bullet. There are a bunch of smart people who've been working there for a long time. If they were a silver bullet, they would have found it already. And also, at the end of the day, the role of the board or an owner is to not handpick favorite feature ideas. A board hires and fires a CEO, and they do corporate governance. So I do think it's an unfortunate distraction, especially so early into the tenure of a new CEO.
Give us your insight into what Parag is like and what you think he will bring to Twitter if he remains CEO.
I'm a huge fan of Parag, I should say. I did hire him when I was running ads engineering there. He's smart, he's rational, he's deeply technical, he's data-driven. He's the kind of person that will make a decision and then stick with it until there's new data, but not hem and haw before there's new data. He has the context of everything that's happened at Twitter. As I mentioned, there are a lot of people that have tried a lot of things, so it's important to know what didn't work out and what did work out, so you don't reinvent the wheel, try new things again. When I took over all of engineering of the company from just the ads team, which was working relatively well, I handpicked just a few people to comb over and work on areas of the company that were extremely important and in dire need of help, and he was on that very, very short list. He's truly excellent.
Alex, what do you think the biggest disconnect is between activist investors who've been involved in the name Twitter, that is, for a couple years now, and Elon now agitating, and what, let's say, the board or what the current management thinks? Because there seems to be a big disconnect. The stock has actually reflected that, obviously, over the last few years. And I'm not asking to comment on the stock, but I'm just saying, like, where do you think that they can find some common ground, how to turn this platform around and maybe just grow faster with more innovation?
So I think one of the problems and unfortunate things about Twitter is it's constantly compared to something it's not. It's compared to Facebook and Instagram, these multi-billion dollar, both billion user networks that have a use case that makes sense for a couple billion people every month to use. I mean, things like, sharing photos online, catching up with old high school friends. Those are billion user activities per month. Twitter is great at what it's great at, but it's probably not on the same scale, that real-time news and breaking events and interacting with pundits and politicians. That's not something that 2 billion people a month want to do. And so I think constantly being compared to that is setting them up to failure. Hopefully they can find common ground, really monetizing and extracting value from what Twitter's good at. Twitter's great at sharing that real-time information. Figure out a way to monetize that. There are tweets everywhere. Tons of people that never use Twitter consume tweets because they see them on shows like yours, they see them in the media, they see them on the web. So figure out a way to extract value from all the mind share that Twitter has instead of focusing on monthly usage. That's just not what the product is.
I think that's interesting that you had mentioned, that people get the greatest bits of Twitter for free just because they're published, they're shown in other forms of media. How do you think Twitter could monetize that?
I think it's a complicated question, and I do think the last thing Twitter needs is outsiders, and I'm an outsider now, just suggesting product ideas. But there are all kinds of models where there's content that gets distributed through other platforms, but people make money off the content. I can't go to YouTube and for free watch every video ever created. Whereas analogously, that is true on Twitter. I mean, I can go to the news, and on many platforms where Twitter extracts no value, I can get all the content on Twitter and they make no money. So I would sort of look at different ways to monetize that content that way, license it or something like that. But there has to be something that gets the value of the Twitter content the way people consume Twitter, which is usually off network, instead of trying to force people into the same usage metrics that Facebook and Instagram are really good at.
It's clear that you're a fan of Parag, Alex, but you also are a fan of Elon Musk. It's just that you think that Elon Musk should go and do bigger and better things. If he were, though, to become CEO of Twitter or own it or take it private, whatever form this transaction could shake out, do you think that could be a good thing for Twitter ultimately, since he is obviously very intelligent and has a lot of good ideas?
He's extremely intelligent. I think that's not the criticism of Elon. I will also say, I know plenty of people at Twitter, Parag, and many others who are also extremely intelligent. I just don't think the world needs another person with an extremely strong point of view about free speech on either side of the political spectrum telling Twitter what to do. There are a million people like that. It's not clear that he can add incremental value, whereas he has a track record of adding massive incremental value in other problems, which ultimately are more impactful on the future of humanity than even what happens to it or not, either way.
Alex, so good to get your perspective. Thank you so much for coming on to Fast. Appreciate it.
It was my pleasure.
Alex Rutter. All right, so 420, April 20th, 4:20 p.m. has passed, Karen, and there has been no tender offer so far. If there should be a tender offer, what does the board have to do next?
So if there's a tender offer, the board would need to respond to the tender offer. They would need to issue a 14D9, which is a response to a tender offer. And in that, they would need to say what's the recommendation that shareholders do, whether they should tender, whether they should not, or whether they can remain neutral. The board can do that. It's less likely. But importantly, the board will also need to talk about how they're coming to their conclusion and what kind of talks or background there has been in discussions or not with Elon. That in Elon's 14D1, his tender offer, he would need to show where's the financing coming from, and he would also need to detail his view of what the back and forth is between him and the board. I think that puts him in a little bit of a minefield in that I would bet he was having discussions with the board that made it seem like he was more than a passive investor prior to the time that he filed a 13D. So that's a landmine for him and his lawyers.